pour cette...
Hello, welcome to this first session of the day on the French pavilions. Thanks for joining us. My name is Ken Gilto. I'm head of climate for Companies for Environment, which is a network counting 60 companies from France and abroad. We work around topics linked with climate transition and environment. I'll be leading this side event, which will be a pleasure for me. As far as the program is concerned, we'll have 3 panels with 3 different points of views around this for this matter. In the meantime, the speakers will be communicating with each other to enrich the debate, and we'll have questions and answers sessions with those who are with us physically today. A rich and dense program. Before we start, I would like to encourage Mathilde Borlaurent from the AFD to join us on stage and showcase her topic and what's at stake. Thank you very much. Hello everyone. Thanks. Many thanks to you for being on site with us. This morning I'll be speaking French. This is a French pavilion. It's quite important. For those who need English, you have simultaneous interpreting. This COP28 has opened quite quickly with an agreement quickly reached around the creation of the damages fund. It's a reason to be glad, I think. It's a pleasure, and it's a good start, a good kick-off. Reasons for hope. There are many topics to tackle, of course, major ones, make no mistake. The world balance, of course, but the global goal and adaptation, which is yet another topic, yet another pitfall, yet another obstacle that is losing visibility, by the way, because of other agendas like losses and damage. I'm not saying that there are more topics that are more important than others, but of course funding is a topic that is losing visibility, so we should keep on sharing our best practices and experiences. Within the AFD, we've been doing progress, strong steps for the 10 last years in terms of money volume. Back in 2015, it was less than 100 million euros engaged each year for adaptation to climate change, 115 countries around the world. It's now 2 billion euros for the same topic, the same agenda, slightly more than 30% of our climate funding. The steps are quite spectacular. We hope it's just the beginning, taking into consideration how important the cross-cutting topics are. We talk a lot about vulnerability. The losses and damage, of course, puts at in line the definition of vulnerability. Vulnerability, how you define it, what's a vulnerable countries, and how you qualify, how you work on countries and populations' vulnerability inside countries, whatever the level of development would be, of course, because that's a topic. There are vulnerable populations everywhere in each and every country with response capacities that vary. So adaptation is about preparing to that. It's about anticipation to all these kinds of crises. You have a chronic crisis, you have extreme weather events, but it comes in all colors of shapes. Adaptation is a specialty. So we decided to listen to specialists, experts. I guess you'll already know about it, but integrating an infrastructure, considering forecasting is another job. Adaptation is something that allows you to transform a territory, to think on the long run, to think about the services, about infrastructures. There is the pure design, but there are services. Infrastructures are also services providers. And that is something we have to think about when we back finance and fund adaptation to climate change. We have a large scope of experts, of specialists that will speak about all the aspects today. Bastel has assessed 10 years of adaptation to climate change funding as far as Africa is concerned. He said clearly that we could be doing better and should be doing better. But of course, we intend to make progress, further progress. You'll hear about the results of the assessments. I think it would be a good inspiration for your work. And last but not least, together with the ADEME, with the International Water Office, which is a sign showing that there is a need for us to cooperate, to work like a team, to think and act collectively together. Together we stand. Thank you. Good work to all of you, and sorry, but I can't stay. So see you later.
Merci beaucoup, Mathilde.
Thank you very much, Mathilde, for these words of introduction. With no further ado, I propose we start things off. We'll be talking about lenders, money lenders, development banks. Anna Lafontaine de Bastel and the German Bank for Adaptation. Alain will start with you. Peter, then Peter Hilligers. To keep on this, remain on the same tracks. Bastel and Company, an assessment has been made. It's been supervised by the AFD. What can you tell us in terms of the lessons you've been drawing from this adaptation approach?
Merci, Ken.
Ah.
Allô. C'est pas problème de micro.
Alors pour le moment, si ça fait.
Allô. Ah oui, c'est mieux.
Seems to be working better. Hello everyone. That's a very beautiful Sunday, a sunny Monday in Dubai. As you can hear, I'm from Canada. I hope you can understand me. Bastel is a company that was born in Canada, as I was, but you have offices in Europe, as well in Belgium, in France, and it's been a pleasure for us to help the AFD in this assessment process, to work with them, with their projects portfolio. It started 2 years ago, the adaptation. We used to call it a climate benefits portfolio. We analyzed the whole portfolio, more than 80 projects, and we made a sample of 30 projects out of them that we have analyzed more in details, and some case studies in certain countries like Madagascar, Senegal and Niger. From after this work, and of course the objective was to see in terms of assessment the relevancy, the efficiency, the impact and the availability of the work performed by the AFD as far as adaptation would be concerned, and what lessons could be drawn and what recommendations could be expressed in order to back the AFD in its efforts. The ambitions were and are huge, because the AFD strategy, as you heard, is quite huge in terms of mitigation and in terms of adaptation to climate change. Of course, the challenge, the strategies of the organization, the countries, the money lenders, is always about operational implementation, and we are making no exception here. So the assessment has given the possibility to identify some of the challenges to reach adaptation and an enhancement of the adaptation and mitigation. The first challenge, the first key challenge, is about enhancing the project's design for co-benefits and adaptation, to optimize the co-benefits and reinforce the availability, how well you can assess projects. You'll see later what the advantages are. So how can we enhance the design? There are two key recommendations from that point of view. First, about diagnosis, about establishing a risk diagnosis. To map the risks precisely, you have to analyze the hazards, the exposure to the unexpected events, what the vulnerabilities are, both in terms of sensibility or sensitivity, how vulnerable people are, how vulnerable infrastructures are, and what capabilities you have in terms of adaptation. How various actors can and stakeholders can adapt themselves. The AFD will say how far, to what lengths they've gone, what steps. Now, recommendations, second level. That's linked with understanding and consistency, making actions consistent with each other, establish a logic, a broad logic in terms of intervention and projects design. What you do has to be consistent. It's about identifying indicators, tangible it's about adaptation in the project. It's not about the whole project, but being an adaptation project. You have also development projects, but you have to consider the adaptation factor. And now how to make it more explicit via your analysis, and then integrate it in a logic, consistent chain, so that you can follow up the consistency from scratch to the very end. The second challenge is about fostering integration, project integration within the public policies dialogue around climate. There is a true potential here. As I said, the AFD and other moneylenders have their policies, their strategies. Now, how to anchor the tangible actions held by these projects within this strategy? The idea here is to develop tools that allow us to perform a real screening when it comes to choosing interventions, choosing actions, and how you organize them, how you inform people, how you what result indicators you use, what KPIs you use in order to nourish the implementation of the projects together with the moneylenders. So that's a level. There are good practices from that point of view, but there is also another challenge in terms of support to this strategic plan, a political dialogue and the implementation of the beneficiaries, the countries that benefit. Is there an analysis performed as we choose the instruction of the projects to see to what extent things are consistent and really support the countries that are supposed to be the beneficiaries, and in what way? I've been talking about logic, about the whole chain. There are indicators that you can come up with, that are created, that you can use in order to keep being informed. Finally, a third challenge, which is to make it sure that the co-benefit adaptation projects really diminish the vulnerability of the populations, concretely, now and on the long run. It is a viability perspective, a viability prospect. It's a need to target precisely. It takes an adequate and precise analysis from the very beginning. You have to identify the vulnerable populations. It's about a screening. It's about how vulnerable who is. There are various levels of vulnerability. There are populations that are more vulnerable than others, of course, in order to target precisely the populations or the geographical zones, the basins, the coasts, the regions, to target the most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable populations. And last but not least, it's about better taking into consideration the long-term, the long-run prospect. And it's important. It's linked with the whole climate change scenario prospect and what's awaited when it comes to the zones where we are supposed to work. Of course, we have modelings, climate modelings, thanks to what we clarify what's at stake. It's often made at the national level, but you can also make it international. You can, thanks to what your approach can be far more appropriate, so that you can also rethink the focus of the project. You can focus on agricultural populations in zones where you know that there will be no agriculture in 20, 30 years, but that makes no sense, does it? So you have to think on the long run in order to see whether you have or not some transformational models, so that you can take into consideration the long run in the way you create a real viability on the long run with population resilience or resilience. In certain cases, it's not possible, of course, to come up with that kind of long-term models, long-term modelings, because sometimes it's either it's long run, either precise. You have to focus on win-win solutions. So it's about how you can put in place some no-regret measures. It requires flexibility and working from scratch around adaptation to climate change in a long-run viability prospect. That would be about it. I guess Catherine will add a couple of things to make it more nuanced than it was. But thank you very
vois qu'il y a effectivement.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now I'm going to ask Peter to, maybe there are challenges because maybe every project will be different, very specific in its characteristics. With your point of view, what are the tools that you were able to develop to facilitate the integration of this adaptation in the assessment and in the implementation of your development project?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the results of this evaluation. And I think KfW, without having gone through such a thorough assessment, would probably share the same findings. So, because we all development banks are struggling, I guess, in the same way. And if I speak about the German Development Bank, KfW, and our work on climate adaptation and this broader scope as well, of loss and damage and all these facets of adaptation, we started in the late 2008-9ish years, when we recognized that adaptation is important, that we have to add it to our impacts. We also recognize, of course, it's a highly complicated topic, because you really don't know in the beginning what you adapt to, and then you have to find out how to adapt to it, and then you have to find the people who benefit from it. So it's quite a search process. And we've gone through 15 years of learning, building our portfolio in KfW over the years. And I think the major step that we took was 2018-19, so already now 4 years ago, where we decided, okay, we have about 250 transactions a year as the development bank globally, or say in 50, 60 countries, not to make the number too large. So 50, 60 countries, 250 transactions, all very different. Different countries, different sectors, different beneficiaries, infrastructure, social projects, health, crisis and conflict mitigation, stuff like that. So it's all over the place. So, and we have about maybe 600-700 people in the bank who are working on these transactions. So how do you get to all these people who have a very different degree of understanding of what you want to do? And so we decided, okay, we have to go and give the people a rigorous assessment process. Everyone can apply without being a specialist. Of course, we still need specialists, but as a starting point, we say we don't start with the specialist knowledge, but we start with general knowledge. Yeah, so the first level is country. So we have country fact sheets which we kind of regularly update. Every 1-2 years, we're trying to put in the new scientific know-how, knowledge about regional and national climate scenarios. And then we break it down to sectors. And then we also decided that we have to give some kind of standards for the assessment process, because we all know in science and climate science, there are all these different scenarios about the future. Yeah, so we have these RCP scenarios which are all over the place, and we said, okay, let's give some guidance. So we use one scenario as a base case with a time frame up to 2050. And then we break it down to the time frame of the project, or we try to at least. So if the project is designed to be 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, then we try to bring the project assessment to this time period. And all of this we programmed into a digital application. Yeah, it's been a long way, honestly, and we are not through. Yeah, but I think we managed to cover maybe 2/3 of the portfolio. Especially the direct investments, that's the easiest part. So if we go to Senegal and we invest into a solar PV project, it's very easy because you know a location, you know the country, you say the plant is supposed to run for 20 years, so this gives you your parameters for the assessment. But if we say we do a basic health program in a country which covers the entire country, then you might have 25 or 30 locations in the country. It makes it already a little more complicated. And if you say you do policy-based lending for a country, then you don't even know what is being funded with the money. So you just know the money goes to a country, and they will use it for something. So what are you looking at? So you're going to look at the national adaptation strategy, the national adaptation plan, and you're trying to find out, okay, are they well placed within their own national plans regarding covering adaptation needs of the population, of the economy, in a future scenario. So you go to the macro level. So this is all these different assessments that you're trying to do. And so let me say one more thing, that is, apart from having programmed this digital application that we run in our internal system, we also access an external database, which is coming from a reinsurance company. So we bought ourselves some data from Munich Re. So it's something which everyone can buy. You can even get open access, but then you get a limited data set. So we got, this year actually was the first year we got a contract, and we got project-specific data access. So in this tool, you can actually access GPS-based project locations. And then they have their own, like an insurance company is doing, a risk assessment based on their own data, which they get somewhere else, and feed into their own risk assessment algorithm. And so that gives us, for a project, an initial idea of what we're dealing with. So you put it, actually I did it for my home. So I looked at it and I put the data in for my home where I live, and I said, oh shit, there are some risks I have to deal with. And so the same thing we do for the projects. And then from that, say, initial risk assessment, we can start working out feasibility, further defined risk assessments, what you were talking about, identifying the population that is, say, the most vulnerable. And all of this comes through this assessment process. We call it climate mainstreaming, because we assess every project. So we don't go only for the projects where we know from the start that there is a need. So we say every project has to go through it, because sometimes you just don't know that you have something, an asset that you are creating, which is actually vulnerable, or a population that is actually vulnerable. So every project is supposed to go through this process. At the end of the process, it's documented so that you can actually change your analysis or update your analysis later on. If you think you've got new data, you've got new findings, you can share it with other people. You can go and talk to the project partner and say, look, this is our assessment. Do you think it's valid? So this is basically how we try to make our entire portfolio climate resilient. We also say it's going to be Paris compatible because of this. Yeah, at least on the resilience side. Of course, the mitigation side I didn't talk about. It's part of the process too. And as I said, we are not through. Yeah, we are covering right now maybe 1/3 of the entire portfolio successfully. There are many transactions which are still not covered appropriately, especially the unspecific investments. So, like I said, policy-based lending or open credit lines, budget finance, balance sheet finance. All these things are more complicated. Anyway, that's the process. If you have any questions, I'm happy to discuss. And if you have better ideas, please let me know.